Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It is Juneteenth. And yes, Donald Trump has made it ultimately famous. Thank goodness for Donald Trump, who evidently educated all of his supporters that for the last 155 years, black people have been free from slavery. Look, give him credit where credit is due, because truth be told, I can probably guarantee you that none of the people who were around Trump actually knew what Juneteenth was. And I would argue that his supporters didn't either. So this could be an education process, something folks didn't get while they were in grade school. So maybe we get another federal holiday out of this. And maybe we actually think about what this one means. I know a lot of the other ones we kind of take for granted, like Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's just a day for cookouts and nonsense. Maybe this is a moment where, we take June 19th every year and we actually remember the Civil War and the battles, and we think about that flag that they love to fly down in the South, and that the rebels love to have on there because it's a giant, screw you. And maybe we reevaluate what that treasonous flag actually means. Just kind of a thought. Kind of throwing that out there. But yes, 155 years ago, Army Major F.W. Emory informed the slaves in Galveston, Texas, that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. And maybe it won't have to be 155 more years before people are actually treated equal. So again, this is an important moment. Take a moment, reflect, and hopefully we move forward. And I'll tell you, this is one of those moments where you start talking about elections, talk about November. It really is who you put in the White House. It really is who you put into Congress. It really is about who you put in the Senate. It really is who your governors are and your state representatives and your state senators and your local town council. It's really about the people that represent you in our government. And the fact that Juneteenth has been a holiday in Texas since 1980, and it's taken, the deaths of numerous people on video in front of us to get even a conversation about making it a national holiday, I think speaks volumes. Now, on the 20th, big rally going to happen. Big white supremacist rally. The Klan members, the Trump members are going to go out and they're going to they're going to party like it's 1999. Here's the thing, and this is the thing that really bothers me. The Supreme Court of Oklahoma ruled today that, you can go ahead with your with your Trump rally. They did so unanimously. Go forth, spread your virus. Go forth, do your due. The court is not going to stop you. And what is even worse, you have the mayor of the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had called for curfews and had called for some measure of sanity. They have now lifted those curfews because, the people who are lining up days early to get into the rally, they would be violating the curfew, obviously. Now, as I was thinking about this, you're going to have, these people lined up, and none of them will be wearing masks. You know that, right? None of them are going to social distance. In fact, they're going to flaunt the fact that they're operating outside of sanity. They're going to show off and primp and preen and show us liberals what real men and women do: infect each other. And Then they're going to go into the arena after days of, commingling on the sidewalks, and they're going to get other people sick. And those other people are going to end up going back to their communities, and we're going to be worse off than when we started. And this is the kind of, nonsense where you just go, when do we as a society, when do we just stop being so ignorant and stupid? When do people stop acting against their own best interests? I mean, it's really quite amusing on a certain level that you're going to have all these people. And I said this yesterday, and I got a couple of emails from folks who were, oh, you don't really mean that you want them all to die. No, I don't want them all to die. I just want them to get sick and be really miserable. If that's better. But here's the thing. This is the sad reality. They're doing this on purpose. You've got Donald Trump who's saying, anybody who wears a mask, they're doing it, just out of a matter of protest to me. And, I can't imagine being that narcissistic to think that everything revolves around you. Most of us hate wearing the masks, but do so, one, out of courtesy to others, and two, to protect our own behinds. But here you have this moment where the Supreme Court of Oklahoma is saying, nope, you go right on ahead, and unanimously so, in a place that already, reports are coming out saying that already hospitals are filling up with people who are sick with the virus. They're blowing, you know how we talk about flattening the curve? They're blowing right through the ceiling, is the reporting that I'm hearing coming out of Tulsa. And this is just another moment where it's going to get worse. And what did Trump have to say if anyone bothers to come and protest him? And I'll tell you, I don't think anyone should show up to protest him. I think we should just ignore him. That's the worst thing you could do to Donald Trump is completely, totally freaking ignore him. Like he does not even exist. To me, that's the way you go with this. Completely ignore him. But anyway, he tweeted out today, any protesters, anarchists, agitators, looters, or lowlifes who are going to Oklahoma, please understand you will not be treated like you've been treated in New York, Seattle, or Minneapolis. It will be a much different scene. And I tweeted to Twitter and to Jack, the CEO of Twitter, going, this is a threat. This is him saying, if you have the audacity to come and have your First Amendment rights heard and to protest this president, it's going to be violent. They're going to, they're going to crack some heads. Now understand, this is the guy who says he's the law and order president. And he's, seriously doubling down on that with, we're going to crack some heads. We'll keep people in line. His line. I mean, it's really, really scary. And now you look at this whole thing, which is just ludicrous, that they're still considering having this rally in a place that's spiking. Oklahoma, as we talked about last night, had a record number of cases on Thursday. They're expecting another record today. What do you think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, what do you think next week is going to bring us? And Tulsa's not alone. There was a story that came out that said that in 20 states, coronavirus is exploding. In 20 states plus DC, it's decreasing, like Pennsylvania, because we're trying to do the right thing. And by rushing to reopen, by hurrying through this process, you're only going to make it longer, more painful, and more deadly. But to be honest, I gotta think that's what they want. There's some part of me that looks at Trump and his supporters and the people who are deliberately saying we're under no circumstances going to wear a mask. We're going to show up. We're just not doing it. In fact, the press secretary today, this Kayla McEnany, she said that she's going to the big rally in Oklahoma, and she's not wearing a mask. Damn it! It's her personal choice, she said. Because she believes, and this is the scary part, she believes that Trump's going to keep her safe. And that's one of my problems with the Believe crowd. Now, Trump's campaign manager said, no, I'll be wearing one. Because he's not stupid. And this is one of those moments where I would love the cameras to go backstage and see the Trumpkins who are wearing masks. See the people in his administration who are doing all of the things that they're supposed to do. While their fearless leader is out there saying, just those liberals who want you to do it. Because we've all seen the videos on the internet of people showing up to stores saying, I have a health condition. I have an ACA condition, and you can't make me wear a mask. And then getting all indignant when the private store owner says, no, you can't come in because we're protecting our workers. And people, stomping their fists going, I have a First Amendment right. No, you don't. No. And this is the scary part. Oh my gosh, ignorant we are sometimes. But here's the thing. Now remember, when we were talking about flattening the curve, you go back, think back to April. I know it's a long time ago. I know April and May seemed like a lifetime ago. According to the reporting, we had hit a peak of about almost 32,000 new cases a day in April. And April 10th, I guess, was the peak of it, and it began to come down, according to reporting. About 32,000 a day. Right now, we've seen the numbers now jumping back up to almost 28,000 a day. So we're heading again in the wrong direction. And a lot of people say, "Well, we're not going to get a second spike." No, we're not through the first one yet. This is clearly a moment where the ding-dongs, nitwits, and morons are making things worse. The people like the Florida governor, who now evidently is blaming Hispanics for the spike in coronavirus. It's not all the people who are rushing out to the bars and the beaches. It's not that white woman and her 15 friends who went out to the bar. The healthcare workers who went out to the bar, and all of them got sick because, we were doing the right thing. We were doing such the right thing. No, it's these Hispanics because, and you'll love this, it's the Hispanics because, they go to work in school buses, and according to Ron DeSantis, they're packed in like sardines. So it's their fault. It's all their fault. It's not the fact that his policies are pushing this stuff. It's not the fact that his leadership has failed. None of that. No. It's that these poor people who have to go pick our crops, they're packed into buses like sardines. And it's not that our labor laws have completely failed them and our immigration policies. No. It's none of that. It's their fault. And yet we're going to get 19,000 morons and nitwits wearing MAGA hats going to infect each other in some big, giant, psychopathic orgy. And we're going to blame somebody else for it. It's really quite scary. And if that weren't enough, plan on no baseball this year. Because evidently spring training is now, according to the latest report, the Phillies and the Blue Jays have basically shut down because a number of their players have contracted the virus. And again, we're reopening and moving right on by it. That's what scares me. And we've got an administration led by the Orange Menace, and let's not forget Kayleigh McEnany, who flat out refused to wear masks. And now you see this Joe Rogan saying, wearing masks for those female dogs. We're in for a very long summer, friends. Long summer. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, out of this, and I've been saying this for a while, the scary part of the next couple of months is, how's China going to use this against us? As businesses by the millions go bankrupt and families go bankrupt and our institutions struggle, will the Chinese come in and sweep everything up for pennies on the dollar? I say bet on it. When we come back, we're going to get our China expert to come share some thoughts on, what's coming and maybe how we stop it. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day 26,000 members of the ILWU in Hawaii walked off the job. Their strike was a 4-day protest against the witch hunt convictions of the Hawaii Seven. Many docks and plantations immediately shut down. Stevedores refused to load military cargo headed to the war in Korea. At the height of the McCarthyite Red Scare, Union militants continued to be the primary targets of anti-communist hysteria. Longshoreman leader Jack Hall and 6 co-defendants had just been tried and convicted under the Smith Act. The ILWU denounced the trial and verdict as a frame-up. It was the ultimate move to bust the increasingly powerful union on the islands. The ILWU had come under heightened surveillance after successfully organizing stevedores and many sugar and pineapple plantations. The real trouble began after a long and bitter dock strike in 1949. Then Nebraska Senator Hugh Butler proclaimed the island to be firmly in the grips of a communist attack. HUAC arrived the next year to investigate the Red situation. In August 1951, the FBI conducted early morning raids to arrest the 7 on charges of violating the Smith Act. The arrests came as the ILWU threatened a sugar strike, having reached an impasse in contract negotiations. During the trial, it was clear the 7 were being tried not for anything they did, but for allegedly being part of a vast and secret conspiracy. The proceedings had the quality of a show trial, designed more to terrorize the public and labor movement than to prosecute any actual crime. Their convictions were finally overturned with the landmark 1957 Yates decision, which rendered much of the Smith Act unenforceable. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is one of those things that's got me, it's kind of scratching my head because, China, Hong Kong, the Chinese taking over Hong Kong. You've got now Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying that they're going to treat Hong Kong as a Chinese city rather than an autonomous city. And they're saying to the extent that China treats the territory as a Chinese city. So I'm not quite sure what our Secretary of State is saying or thinking, other than I think they're surrendering. Other than I think that they don't have a clue of what to do. And here's the thing. While we have no leadership, while we have an administration that we now find out, thanks to John Bolton's book, that was looking to make a deal with China in exchange for some help to get reelected, I see nothing positive with this administration with regards to China. And I see China basically continuing to eat our lunch and continuing to dominate our manufacturing, which is why I've asked our friend Emily de the Bruyere to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. They've got a new report out now on just what to expect, maybe with this coronavirus, what China is targeting, and maybe how bad it can be. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me.
So walk me through this idea, this scenario, because I've been saying for a while our businesses are going to go belly up, our stocks are down, the Chinese are going to come in and they're going to sweep stuff up for pennies on the dollar, and we're going to end up ultimately being beholden to them for much more and for much longer than I ever imagined we would be.
Yeah, absolutely. So since really the beginning of this crisis, China has been explicit in its state planning about wanting to take advantage of COVID to speed up its international strategy. Chinese policy documents talk about fast forwarding and about capturing the opportunity. And the original framing was much like that of 08-09, that China can buy up depreciated strategic assets, that it can increase its market share, that it can throw in its liquidity in a cash-strapped global market to up its influence, its presence, and the resources it can claim from abroad. But the twist on all of this is that US government investment is right now looking to help us recover faster. We have in the works a major infrastructure bill. And China is positioning to make sure that that US government investment ends up serving Chinese purposes.
How is that? How is that possible?
Yeah. The idea is that as we put money into American infrastructure to rebuild, it ends up being Chinese companies that do that rebuilding, or at least that claim integral parts in the rebuilding, so that not only do they make money, but they secure positions of leverage in our systems. And this isn't new. Like, Huawei got its inroads into US telecoms in 08 and 09 when we invested in rural telecoms as part of our recovery efforts. Now we're dealing with the consequences, but what happens when China speeds all of that up as we put money into transportation, into other new infrastructure systems like digital ones, and suddenly they've accelerated their entire plan to capture our systems.
That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's frightening. On not only are they going to take over, not only are they going to dominate the global scenario, we're paying for it.
Exactly.
That's like you're writing out the kick me sign and putting it on your own back and then kicking yourself.
Oh, yeah. And we've been doing that for decades. Like, we've been fueling China's strategy with our research and development, but also with our like cooperative institutions that they take advantage of for decades. That's the crux of China's strategy. But now they've positioned themselves so that as we try to compete, that competition ends up helping China.
You know, because here's the thing. I look at the bridge out in California, and it's one of, in talking about infrastructure, that's the very simplistic bit of infrastructure. We built this giant bridge, and it's still not done. It's still not right. It's never going to be finished because it's never going to be right. And we overpaid for it. It took longer to deliver. And again, we got screwed and didn't use American steel, didn't use all American labor, and it didn't benefit us. Are you telling me that virtually every bit of investment going forward is going to be the same bad scenario that we see in that damn Bay Bridge?
Absolutely. And the other thing is that as we keep not using American steel or not using American industrial robots, China builds up its market share in all of those areas so that in the next step, tomorrow, next week, next year, we're that much less capable of relying on US systems. Because China's strategy it's not just about making money, it's about making sure that in critical supply chains, we depend on Beijing.
Yeah, it's about dominance. No, you're absolutely right, and it's militaristic in its end game. They're fighting a war, and we just think we're getting cheap stuff.
Absolutely. And China says this. So they have this grand strategy called military civil fusion. And we don't usually understand like what actually that means here, but what it means is that China is taking the competitive battlefield that we normally ascribe to the military domain, and it's playing that out in the commercial world. But we still think that commerce is cooperative. And so we're like an army that's literally handing bullets to China, whereas they see this as how they achieve their international dominance.
So is there a way to stop this? Because look, I've always said there's got to be, I know we're a capitalist society. We can fight that all we want. It is what it is. We've been sold this ideal that, it's all about competition and the one who makes the best widget for the cheapest price. That they fight it out in the marketplace. But China's not playing by any of the same rules. And they've got a completely different end game other than delivering good products at low prices. They're talking about world domination. That's our business, damn it.
Yeah. And they're also subverting capitalism. They're turning it against us. They're turning our openness and our free markets and our desire to have systems that work and cooperate in economics. They're turning all of that against us as offensive tools. But also, capitalism is a tool that we can use to compete. We just have to do that strategically in recognizing how our system works.
Right.
So it's going to be our private sector that wins this for us if any entity does. And the government, instead of pretending to be the private sector and trying to take that over, has to be out there shaping incentives in like a comprehensive, large-scale way so that the private sector actually acts according to our long-term interests, not according to their immediate profit, which is what helps China.
Now,
And
the last time we spoke, we were talking about the new 5G that's coming out, and I'll tell you, for days afterward, my mind was just just floating with the horrible possibilities of a system that talks to other systems being controlled by an adversary. Buses that are running into each other, waterworks that are being turned off, just all kinds of chaos. Is there no way to pursue policy that says, look, in the national interest, we have to have American companies that do this stuff. It has to be American made, and go back to the ideals that I've been talking about for a long time, which are domestic production for domestic consumption. Trade things that we can't make that we need, and you do that on a certain level. But this idea that export-based trade models, horrible for us.
Yeah, and they don't work when one player isn't playing by the rules. The one thing, though, is we don't alone have the scope and the scale we need to be able to compete with China. So we absolutely need industrial planning, industrial policy that does that. We're also going to have to work, as long as we do this effectively, with our allies and our partners. And we need to work that into our free trade deals so that they're actually operating competitively as well vis-a-vis China, and that we have amongst ourselves a consortium we can trust that is reliable and that can rival China's.
But again, as you said a moment ago, our system's nowhere near set up for any of that. We think to the next quarter as corporate America. How can I line my pockets? How can I get G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip for the kids for Christmas? Where the Chinese are thinking 20, 30, 50 years down the road on how they can dominate industry and dominate new technologies. How do we get past our short-term, our short-term fetish and start thinking, strategically across industries?
And that's where the government comes in. That's where it really does fall to the government to change incentives. So they can't be the ones that are going to build the transportation infrastructure that allows us to do this all on our own. That's the private sector. But the government has to be shaping incentives so that that transportation infrastructure gets built independently. And the other thing we have to be doing at the same time, because not only are we short-termist, are we going by the next quarter, but Beijing is also carefully making sure that our boardrooms are in part constructed by people whose incentives and whose interests are tied to China's own. That's true of our boardrooms. It's also true of the international organizations that set our rules and our standards. So at the same time as the US government and its allies and partners are shaping incentives, we also need to make sure that our systems aren't co-opted. And
Right.
if they are, to create new ones.
So if I'm getting you right in the way I'm hearing this, and again, there's a lot here to digest. We're at a moment where we've got an administration that is isolating themselves from the rest of the world. We're pulling troops out of Germany. We're mocking the German leader. We're doing all kinds of stuff to basically end up alone. And at the very moment where we need the international community the most, and we've got a guy in the White House who reportedly, look at Bolton's book, was willing to sell us down the road for a re-election help. I guess I don't have a lot of hope in this then.
That said, we can use these things all to our advantage, or at least we have to. So whatever we've done, foreign policy wise, let's now say that lets us say with credibility to our allies and partners that we are willing to take risks, and that now that risk is going to be competing with China. Let's look at the Bolton story and have the story that comes out of that be that China is routinely exterminating Uyghurs in Xinjiang. So instead of having all of this be a question about whether our policy was right or wrong, let's make it all a question of how China is subverting our world order and how we can use our strengths to actually compete.
So I'm going through this, and again, I'm thinking about how we, because I'm thinking on the short term, obviously the next election, but this isn't a short term thing. This is decades probably in this fight, because it's taken us just 2 short decades to get. I mean, really stop and think about how short of amount of time we've given up the most powerful manufacturing base in the history of civilization, and how fast China has risen to the place that they're at now.
But also how long China has been planning on doing all of this. Their ambitions and their rhetoric are consistent for the past 40 years. And we've woken up in, if we're lucky, the past 10, probably more like the past year. So this is a long-term plan. But the other thing is, like, yes, this is a peacetime struggle that will play out over decades, but we're out of time. Like, we need to be done admiring the problem, because if we don't take real action in the next like 2 months, maybe give us a year, the contest is over.
Right. So give me some thoughts on how you see this playing out, and what we should be doing right now to stop, the Chinese from coming in and basically taking over our industries. Because look, I'm reading reports that next month there's going to be a tsunami of bankruptcies, from corporate bankruptcies to homeowner bankruptcies to family bankruptcies, and this is just a pleasure field for China to be able to grab up what they want. What should we be doing?
Yeah. So first, as you just pointed out, our COVID recovery has to be competitive. So whether it's with our infrastructure bill that our latest report is on, we make sure China can't co-opt that. We also make sure that China can't just go up now as the US is down and buy up our whole country. That's the very immediate. But at the same time, we have to stop deluding ourselves that we can just go in and protect our infrastructure efforts, or protect ourselves from bankruptcy now, or decouple in rare earths, and everything is going to be fine. Because this is systemic. It's a contest among systems where China has made our system dependent on it, and we have to be acting at a large scale, at home and internationally. So we need to be looking at the institutions and the systems that govern our world, and whether that's supply chains or the WTO, and looking at them and fixing them so that they don't depend on China and China doesn't govern them. And if that's impossible, make a new one.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, because I'm thinking about how all this stuff plays through. I'm thinking about the short term, the infrastructure that may be coming. Is this a moment of? Here's my problem. The last time we spoke, we did a written piece and put it out on Daily Kos and a couple other places. And the overwhelming responses I got from people were, well, China's just out competing us. They're just doing better. They're just smarter. They've figured out this and you're just being protectionist. And it's one of these moments where I go back to my own economics 101 class, where you want to argue about rice and beans and nonsense like that. They're not playing by the same rules, but we seem to think, as a society, and the responses I got were overwhelming, of people going, well, they're just out competing us. We've got to compete by lowering wages and getting rid of regulations and all the things that you've heard. Is that the answer?
China is lying, stealing, and cheating. And that's not okay. We can do whatever we want, but as long as China is basing its system off of stealing our research and development, about giving us false information about how it operates, and on operating entirely against international trade rules, then nothing's going to work. So we need to actually call them to account for that and stop just rolling over and letting it happen.
I'm right there with you. You said a second ago, though, that the private sector is going to save us. I got to tell you, the private sector is what got us into this. So I have very little hope for that, because the greedmeisters who sit at the top of these big corporations, I don't think they really care one way or another. All they care about is the money's green and it's going into their pockets.
That's definitely what it looks like. There's this hope, as I see it, which is that we have a new institutional system where the private sector has connections to it, influence over, and it can actually do something. So what if we need to leave the WTO, right? China's breaking all those rules. China's taking advantage of the WTO.
Right there with you.
We set up a new institution with the allies and partners who share our norms and systems and whom we can trust, and we bring in the private sector to be a stakeholder in that, and also to set its own rules for itself so that it's actually called to account in a global leadership type position. And we also stop pretending that we're still in a system where nation states are the determinant actors and everybody's playing by those rules.
Well, I hope, I know this is something we're going to be talking about for a long time. Where can we take a look at the report that you guys have just put out?
On our website, horizonadvisory.org.
We will make sure that we get links out so folks can take a look at that. Emily, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you do. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again as this continues.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff.
Rick.
Again, make sure you check out their website, Horizon Advisory. We'll make sure we get links out so you can look at the report. To me, it's just scary as all can be, because sadly, our political system just isn't geared for this yet. We have to make it that way. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day that 2,000 Union soldiers marched into Galveston, Texas. With them, they carried the news that those enslaved were now free. The Confederate General Robert E. Lee had actually surrendered more than 2 months earlier. Why then was there a delay in delivering the news of emancipation to Texas? It might have been that there were not enough federal troops to enforce the order. It has also been speculated that freedom was postponed to allow enough time for the enslaved workforce to harvest one last crop of cotton before freedom. Whatever the reason, General Order Number 3 finally was delivered. It read, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation of the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer." On hearing of the news, the newly freed people celebrated. The next year, they celebrated again in a holiday that became known as Juneteenth. In the years that followed, the holiday spread to other cities. But in the segregated South, black residents were often barred from holding Juneteenth events on public land. That is why in 1872, several black men in Houston purchased property and established Emancipation Park as a space to hold the celebration. In 1980, Texas became the first state to formally recognize Juneteenth. Today, this holiday is celebrated in black neighborhoods across the country, with gatherings, barbecues, songs, and remembrances of the fight for freedom. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission decided on June the 2nd that they were going to fire all 492 toll collectors and move forward with fully automating Pennsylvania's turnpike. Now, look, I'm not a Luddite by any stretch of the imagination, but I got to tell you, this decision at this moment reeks of not just opportunism, but it's just plain cruel. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Millions of people are losing their jobs, and they take this moment to jump on this and take this opportunity just to send everybody to the curb. It's wrong to me. The other side of this is, what message does this send to corporate America? What message does this send when the tsunami of job losses that are being predicted because of automation happen? What message is it saying when government is doing this to workers? What moral high ground can we take? Or what good precedent is there? And here to share some thoughts on this, I've asked William Hamilton to come talk with us. He's the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Eastern Region Vice President. He's also the president of the Pennsylvania Conference of Teamsters. They are the folks who represent these workers. And as I've seen reported, they have pledged to pursue all legal avenues to fight for these workers. William, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate giving us an opportunity to tell the public about the real story behind these layoffs. And how despicable it is. And you're right, as you refer to corporate America is starting to hide behind the coronavirus to affect the American workers. So I appreciate the time.
So walk me through the decision of this, because I was under the impression that this wasn't supposed to happen for a couple years down the road. There was a transition plan at some point that was being discussed, that eventually we would get to this point. But now they decide in the middle of a global pandemic to really jab these people in the back.
Well, they did. And that's, I guess, the disturbing part more than anything is that we had an open conversation with the governor, with his administration, with all our friends bipartisan across the state. And we actually went to talk to the governor last year, 2019, when they were rolling out the plans to actually tell us about how they were going to privatize, so to speak, the toll collections and go to an outside third-party agency. And technology, listen, we live in a technological world, so I understand. And we understood, but part of the agreement we had with the state, and quite frankly, with a lot of people in Harrisburg, was that, okay, we understand, we need our people taken care of. You can't throw 500 people out on the street. So let's do this and talk about how we can effectuate this in a fashion that doesn't upset their lives and put them in harm's way. And we did. We came up with a plan, and we understood that within 2 years they would be ready to go toll free.
Right.
That means they have the technology to do it, which, quite frankly, right now they still don't. But then after the contract, we entered contract negotiations in January. Well, it's been going on for the past year, but we got down to the wire in January and February, and I attended those negotiations. And we reached a fair agreement. And the agreement had some concessions from us as the Teamsters, and it also had them committing to us through 2022 that these members would continue to have a job as they phase through this implementation, so to speak. Now, as the pandemic swept across the country and parts of the state, there was a letter dated March 16th from Mark Compton that laid off a specific number of toll collectors with basically a recall notice saying, look, as soon as this traffic picks back up and we're released into different phases, everybody will be called back and we will honor our commitment that we gave to you at negotiations.
Right. And Mark Compton is the CEO of the Turnpike Commission.
Yes, that's correct. He's the CEO of the Turnpike Commission, and he is the one responsible, I guess, for the decision-making process, but I believe this ultimately falls in the laps of the governor, too.
So just so I get this, I want to make sure I get this right then. It's the CEO of the Turnpike Commission, Mr. Compton, who made the decision to fire all these people. But you believe that Tom Wolf has some say or some power or some ability to either make this decision one way or another. So I guess the question I have is, do you think this came from Wolf, or is this something that Compton did on his own and now Wolf's going to have to deal with?
Well, I can tell you this, that we had a hearing this past Monday, and Senator Sabatino, who is the Senate Transportation and Labor Industry Committee chairman, he scheduled a hearing to get the facts, and he sent a letter to Wolf asking him to reconsider while they investigate. And during the course of the hearing, many of the state senators that were on that call, and it was public, so everybody could see and hear it. I was asked to testify, and I did, but it was apparent that during the question and answer sessions from several senators, including Christine Tartaglione, that the Wolf administration knew about it because Compton testified that they had, in fact, informed the governor before the June 2nd date that they voted it. And it's quite startling that they scheduled a meeting on June 2nd, which was Election Day, without notifying anybody in the House or the Senate. And the startling thing about it is is that he just testified on May 12th to the committee about COVID-19 and its effect on the turnpike, and never mentioned anything about a possible layoff. In fact, said we're going to stand by our commitments. So, in short, I think the Wolf administration certainly was complicit in it.
So again, this becomes one of these moments where this pandemic has created a situation where it's almost bipartisan then of the screwing of our workforce. Because look, I'm a big fan of Tom Wolf. I think he's done a good job as governor. This is really disheartening to me. I would expect this from the CEO of the Turnpike Commission, because as he's said in a number of articles that I've read, he's running this like a business, and this is what corporate America would do. This is the kind of decision that I would expect from them. It's not something that I expected from Tom Wolf.
I agree, and I didn't either. I think the governor has done a pretty solid job up to the last 6 months, last 5.5 months at least, and I don't understand the logic involved, because quite frankly, if this was a corporation, they wouldn't, even some of these corporations, as unsightly as they may seem, don't do things that are financially stupid. And this is financially stupid because they're claiming that they're saving $40 million or a year, yet there is no cash toll collection going on anywhere on the turnpike. And in fact, during the hearing, they couldn't answer any of the questions that the senators threw at them to substantiate where the loss of revenue, because right now none of those toll booths that they said were going to be put up and enforced are up. So
Right.
people are running through these toll roads and not getting bills for 3 months, 4 months, and not paying them in some cases.
But isn't this their goal of having this bill by license plate nonsense, which I think is a bad idea? But look, the powers to be, they're going to come up with a scheme to do away with workers at every opportunity. But it just seems to me to be a bad idea. So what you're saying is that this toll by plate thing isn't working. They're not collecting, and it's not working out yet. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yeah, they rolled it out in the middle of COVID-19. They hid behind COVID-19. They weren't ready to roll this out. They saw an opportunity and they took it. And it's really disgusting the way they did this and threw these people out to work, laid them off in 2 weeks' time without notifying a single soul in Harrisburg, or for that matter, for our congressional delegation who wrote a letter to Wolf objecting to it. And I've got 6 congressmen from our area, from southeastern Pennsylvania, all signed it, bipartisan. And all said, we gave the state $2.1 billion to prevent this. What are you doing with the money? So I can't answer that question. I think somebody in the governor's office should.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But here comes the other question, though, because when you look at this, this to me is outside of the fact that this was going to happen anyway. You guys have a contract. I mean, this just seems like it's very cut and dry that you guys had something in it. You had an agreement, and it's being broken midstream. It seems to me like there's legal recourse here.
Well, we are looking into it, and our attorneys are looking into charges at the labor board and various other things, lawsuits, but nothing that we could do at this point in time, even if we're successful, is going to stop these people from being sent home on June 18th, which is a travesty. And these people in the middle of this, let me tell you what we told them during the contract when we ratified it. We told them that, yes, there was things that we didn't like about the contract, and there's going to be an elimination of jobs over a period of time. But all you people are going to get placed in the Commonwealth vacancies. You're going to receive a tuition credit to help receive new job training. And you're also going to be able to apply for existing commissions within the Turnpike Commission that might exist through the third parties they were hiring.
Right.
None of that happened. They were thrown on the street. None of the things that I just mentioned they committed to happened.
See, now for me, Bill, that's the right transition, because I've been talking about Everyone's seen the studies that have come out in the next 15 years. They expect almost half of all of the jobs we do today to be somewhat automated, and there to be a large number of jobs lost. For me, what you've just laid out is the way the transition should happen. We're not going to stop technology. We're not going to turn the clock back to the good old days. We have to embrace what's coming, but we also have to make sure that the people who are doing those jobs aren't the ones who fall through the cracks and end up suffering. So it sounds to me sane and rational. You go, okay, these jobs are gonna go away, but we'll transition you to other employment that we have, get you education if we need it, other opportunities, but make sure that you're somewhat whole at the end of this, instead of just going, well, there's the curb, good luck.
And I agree, Rick. And our job as union leaders is look, we don't like the future when it's painted in a position where we're going to lose members and jobs. But our job is to make sure that those members and jobs that we're losing and those families that were sustained on those jobs continue to have a future. And that was the governor's commitment to us. That was the state's commitment to us. And they broke it. They broke it. And these poor people in the middle of a pandemic, go find a job somewhere today with the benefits and the pension funds and everything that was provided. Where are they going to go find jobs that can support their families?
Is there any way of turning this around? Do you see any path where the CEO of the Turnpike Commission honors what they agreed to? Do you see any path where Governor Wolf, maybe says, "Hey, we're gonna honor this agreement"? Do you see any path forward on that?
Well, I have hope, because there's an upswelling of members of the congressional delegation and the House and the Senate, a bipartisan. This isn't Democrat or Republican. I'm getting calls from every state senator, from every representative from Western Pennsylvania to Philadelphia. And Senator Sabatini is offering language on Monday to reinstate the toll collectors' positions.
Good.
It will run in the Senate Transportation Committee, and the language would have a retroactivity clause so that anyone currently laid off would receive back pay and benefits upon reinstatement. Now, it's a start, and I think we'll have bipartisan support for Senator Sabatina. But again, this falls down to Governor Wolf. Does he veto it? Does he try to? This stuff is happening as we speak.
And ultimately, it's going to come down to us, we the people, putting pressure on our elected leaders and on our governor to do the right thing. Because this comes down to a do the right thing situation for me. You made an agreement. There was a transition to eliminate these jobs at a certain point down the road. Don't use a horrible situation like this pandemic to make it even worse for these folks.
I totally agree. And there's got to be some compassion, too. We see what this country's gone through. And this is just a bad message to send to corporate America also, as you said in the beginning. Can you imagine the companies looking at stuff like this and laughing under the desk saying, I can get rid of it, in the middle of probably getting stimulus money to prevent it? That's the disturbing part of it. Nobody's accountable for the stimulus money that's coming, where it's being spent. If the state of Pennsylvania got $2.1 billion, let's see where it went. I'm
right there with you. So last question I've got for you. What do we do the next day when we wake up? What do you want folks to do? What's the marching order?
The marching order is, we can't take this laying down anymore. Labor, we hide behind, not we, so to speak, but people hide behind their political differences and Democrats, Republicans. We've got to start looking at this country as a labor force that's being affected every single day by corporate America, that we're being undermined. People on the R side or the D side, excuse me, have their own concerns and their own prejudices, but the working people are the ones suffering. And we've got to stop this inner bickering and figure out that we've got to start taking care of the people that go to work every single day of the week. And it doesn't matter what political affiliation they are. They're people with families, and we've got to start taking care of those people and stop this nonsense.
Yeah, and the other message for me that comes out of this bill is, thank goodness those 492 toll collectors have a union to stand up and fight for them, because without a union, without that contract, they have nothing. And that's the message for every worker in this country. Tomorrow, if your employer decides, hey, well, we're automating everything. If you don't have a contract and a union to fight for you, you're just out the door. So this to me is part of that message as well. But Bill, I appreciate the time. I hope folks will call their representatives, call the governor's office, send letters, do all of that stuff, because this is, as you've said, not a right-left issue. This is a right or wrong issue. But I appreciate the time, Bill.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. Bill Hamilton, Eastern Region Vice President for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, also President of the Pennsylvania Conference of Teamsters. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Is this Governor Wolf's fault? Is this the Turnpike Commission CEO Mark Compton's fault? Or is it just our entire political system that's backwards? Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners.
So the
behind
Pennsylvania
bars,
Turnpike
take care of
Commission
patients,
decided on
protect the
June the
environment, and
2nd
more.
that they were going to fire
Chances
all
are you may never see that AFSCME member
492
working
toll
the sewage
collectors
plant,
and
diving
move
underwater to
forward
repair a bridge,
with fully
inspecting an
automating
elevator, or
Pennsylvania's
answering a
Turnpike.
911 call.
Now
Aren't
look,
you glad they
I'm
do?
not a Luddite by
For
any
more
stretch of the
information,
imagination,
visit
but I got to tell you,
AFSCME13.org.
this decision at this moment reeks of not just opportunism, but
Welcome
it's
back to the
just
Rick Smith
plain
Show.
cruel.
Now, here is Rick
We're in the
Smith.
middle of a global pandemic. Millions of people are losing their jobs.
So I'll tell you,
and they take this
listening
moment
to the story about these
workers at the Turnpike Commission just flat out getting screwed. It's infuriating because, as I said, my fear is this becomes what corporate America does. This becomes what they get away with because, hey, the state of Pennsylvania did it. They just threw their workforce to the curb in mass, almost 500 people. They're just kicking to the curb because, hey, you know what? We can collect tolls off your license plate. Knowing that all of us are now going to have to go get that damn Easy Pass. You're not going to be able to go on because look, you don't want to wait in the mail for 2-3 months and then, oh, surprise, and then what's going to happen. They're going to get crossed up. They're going to issue citations. This is chaos waiting to happen. But you know what? They've bet the farm on, hey, we can get rid of all those workers and we can automate the whole damn thing. Make tons of money off of it. It's a bad idea. And like I said, it's bad precedent. Because as the jobs that we lose in the future go this route, and, I've heard stories of, people, finding out that they lost their job because, they got an email or a text or something. This is coming. Now, the part that's infuriating about this is they were all told they were going to get their jobs back. They'd be off for a little bit of time. When things picked up, don't worry about it. We have an agreement. We've got a contract. And now the state is breaking that. And the thing is you're talking about a short period of time. They were transitioning these folks out of these jobs anyway. And the other part, as Bill pointed out, they got money from the federal government. You didn't have to do this, but that's what they chose to do. So if this is now the precedent, get ready, private sector, because it's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dworkin is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Viewing the video of George Floyd's gruesome murder, one word from him stuck in my head.
They didn't have
one
to do this.
painful human utterance that conveys the horror of it all. Mama, Mr. Floyd cried out in desperation
man,
and
how are ya?
disbelief as his life was cruelly and
Another day in
senselessly
paradise.
suffocated in yet another white-on-black slaying by so-called officers of the law. This can't be America, can it? Yes and no. Certainly it can't be the America we accept, one totally antithetical to our people's deeply held democratic values of justice for all. Yet, from the founding of the nation forward, the official knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd has been a common experience for African Americans and also for Latinos, Native Americans, and other people of color. It's that stark separation between the American ideal and reality, now so vividly and violently thrust in our faces, that has ignited such a diverse, massive, and furious protest from coast to coast. To me, this outpouring of public anguish feels different than previous ones, for the protesters are not only angry about what the power establishment did to George Floyd, they're also angry for themselves. The intentional spread of inequality in America is now swamping the once middle-class majority. So more and more people, especially among the young, are feeling the establishment's knee crushing their opportunities, rights, and lives too. More than empathy for the black community, there's now a shared inkling that the rise of autocracy and plutocracy is engulfing all but the moneyed elites, threatening the existence of America itself. This is Jim Hightower saying, there's a rising political awareness that today's social order is corrupt, and the system itself must be changed, not tinkered with, but fundamentally changed. And there's a growing understanding that we really are all in this together, so we've got to stand up for George Floyd, each other, and the America we want.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So 2 days, second day, a social media platform has taken down something Donald Trump has put forth. Yesterday, it was the inverted red triangles. Today, both Twitter and Facebook have removed what they're saying is the racist baby video that was posted by Trump. How far does it have to go? How low does this guy got to go? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, I'll tell you, I think his social media he should be banished from social media. But here to share some thoughts on that. And, well, the big rally coming up, I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the fantastic Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Not sick yet.
Understood. Same here.
Let me knock on something. Let's talk about the racist baby video. What the hell was Donald Trump thinking posting this?
Well, luckily, Facebook and Twitter both acquiesced to the request of one of the sets of parents to take down the video due to copyright violations. And so I think that, it was to provoke another distraction. It was another thing for him to do to try and push the boundaries and also to see, they still have, I'm sure they still have a relationship with Twitter directly. So it's not like they can't just ask a question, will this video be okay or would it not be okay? And just pushing the boundaries. They may be testing out the boundaries to see how far they can go.
Right.
And also see this way it allows, this is sort of like a signal. Maybe they'd expect this, but they didn't know exactly how it would play out. So they're testing their boundaries. I think that's, and also, they're making it more normal. Like, oh, well, he's just sending out another doctored video. And this is obviously this is what they do is you normalize things. Like now it's normal for him to threaten protesters, which is the most un-American thing I've heard since he last talked. So, you know, I think it's just unfortunate that he would exploit children like this, and then to act like it's satire. I'll tell you what, the president of the United States does not have the opportunity to provide the world with satire during a pandemic where over 121,000 Americans have died of the disease, and it's still spreading.
Right.
And then on top of it, you know, he's going to use it as a distraction to attack CNN. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. And not only that, he didn't make the video. He's not the one, and he didn't post the video. He's not the one sitting there uploading videos and then like taking it from there. He's not doing most of the tweeting anyways. You know, the most he'll probably do is hand off a Post-it note with a word or two. His staff knows what he's tweeting. It's more diabolical than we think. It's not him sitting on a toilet by himself. And that's what's even scarier. Is so these are things that are meant to gaslight us, that are meant to mislead us and you know, question whether or not something actually happened. Did he really say that? What's really happening? You know, are we actually in a pandemic right now? Do I actually need to wear a mask? And so it's again unfortunate, but they're just trying to normalize the fact that they want to be able to spread manipulated videos.
Yeah, I mean, you said, you know, it's scarier than him just sitting on a toilet tweeting. I go, that's pretty scary, to be honest. But, you know, I happened to see a bunch of his tweets where they were, you know, they're doling out money to different places, to different cities for different projects. And I'm going, there's no way in hell he sat there and he tweeted that stuff out. Because there are some people because I've said this before, I don't think he's in charge of his own Twitter account. There's just no way. But, you know, I've got some people who believe everything that comes out of that account is the gospel according to Donald.
That's the biggest fraud of all. It's the biggest propaganda machine since the Nazis. This is why General Mattis compared him to the Nazis, something that I bring up almost every day. Because if General Mattis, a person who used to work for Trump, compares him to the Nazis, you better listen. Because this is not a person who plays games like that. I mean, I used to be a really behind-the-scenes guy that wouldn't ever dare to say, you know, even like George W. Bush. I guess I did call him a traitor. Well, that's different. That's years ago when he was president.
When he was a traitor.
I guess I still would call him that. You know, but it's kind of like, like you just kind of. I'm going to focus on Donald. He's the current problem.
He's the current traitor. Yeah, but here's the thing. You know, the Trump supporter would tell you that James Mattis is the most overrated general in the history of the country, because that's what Donald said.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's whatever fits and what works with them best at the time. John Bolton is the best thing ever. John Bolton's the worst thing ever. Don't buy his book, even though he posts like a link with it. I mean, it's all just a big game, and people just get ready for the earthquake. And at the end of it, usually they're still on Trump's side. Usually it's just distraction. Like, I don't know if Trump really cares if he were accused that he was asking for China to help with his election. It's another distraction from the fact that 121,000 Americans and counting, at least, if not 170, 175,000 based on the New York Times report, you know, have died. And we're barreling towards, I spoke to an epidemiologist today from Harvard, and he said that, you know, we're looking at 300 to 400,000 if we don't change our ways. And the only way, the one and only way to mitigate everything, to smash a curve, to reopen everything, is to have masks worn by everybody at all times when in public, no questions asked. That is the one and only way we will get it done. If we have these little pockets or gigantic events, Trump rallies leading up to the election, that could solely cause the second wave of the first wave, or however you want to define it. You know, the second part of the first wave was what the epidemiologist told me yesterday, this morning. The days run together. It's a Groundhog Day from that nobody ever wants to spend, and every day you wake up and you look around and you're like, no, that can't be real. This can't be real. And then you look at your phone and you're like, damn. And so every day I do look at it, and I never let myself not be outraged by what he's done, because I will never let him normalize it. And I look forward to whether it's, and I don't want to be presumptive, but whether it's Biden or whoever's president next, I look forward to working with them to indict all of these criminals. And I'm talking about, I would go after them even harder if they were Democrats.
Yeah.
And most people would know. So this isn't about party affiliation. They're committing crimes, and they try to cover up, right now, they're trying to cover up the death toll of Americans, like to try and downplay the severity of the virus. There are scandals that are bigger scandals in like Florida's history that's ever existed, where they're trying to move over deaths from coronavirus caused deaths to pneumonia. And they've had a spike, in different counties, gigantic spikes. And so there's so many different scandals, and there's so much corruption right now. It's hard to track because people at the same time are getting sick. And then there's, we're still not open pretty much anywhere. And it's just getting worse.
Yeah. Now look at the big rally that's coming up on Saturday. You've got people right now all lined up, ready to go in and scream and holler and be infected. 19,000 people going to show up to this BOK center, and you've got the press secretary herself saying that she will not be wearing a mask. You can't even get the press secretary to say that you should be sane and safe. That she says she's making a personal choice, and she believes Donald Trump's going to keep us safe.
She gets tested probably multiple times a day, going from room to room in the White House after meetings. I'm guessing that they are testing people that frequently because they have to. They come in contact with too many people. I think it's ludicrous. Little signals that they're sending to people where it's okay to not wear masks. It's just the worst thing you can do. And that's one of the things is, if you're not wearing a mask, then you're acting like it's okay not to. So you're also condoning that kind of behavior. You're also, you don't know if you're sick. You don't know if someone else is sick. And, it's ludicrous to think that, again, there's no other way to spread it. So with the event, even them just being in line right now is dangerous for everybody. But let alone having 50,000 people, first of all, which is a pathetically low turnout for a president of the United States. Having that many people inside or outside, people that, that's just risk right there. There's guaranteed to be people that are positive with coronavirus there tomorrow. I think that statistically, it's almost impossible for there not to be. And so when you have this event and it's inside, then you add more risk to it. And then when you have the fact that they're going to be there for a while, that adds more risk. And when you add the big factor that they have it melted into their mind that not wearing a mask is a sense of pride instead of something you should feel shameful for, endangering other Americans and doing one of the most unpatriotic acts you can as an American nowadays, which is not wear a mask. I understand some people have their own issues, but with this can become, and I didn't know this was a word, but super spreader event, which can be a catalyst that can cause damage in us to shut down. So what I ask everybody is, if we know, if the Oklahoma Supreme Court, if the mayor of Tulsa, if the governor of Oklahoma and the Trump campaign team, and everybody knows that there's this risk, they make them sign waivers to get in the building. If everybody knows about this, then what do you call it when you know that there's going to be people who have coronavirus there? Statistically speaking, it's going to happen. It's going to spread. It's just a matter of how many people will it spread to. And I think the arrogance and the ignorance or willing ignorance of the Trump people is going to allow it exponentially to spread. And this is going to track back. But luckily we will have, because of his online registration system and everything, we'll have records to cite so that we can trace it back. But we probably will have to subpoena those. But this is what's going to happen. We should not be the first people in the world to host a large gathering of people who don't believe in wearing masks should not be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when they're not even at the height of the pandemic, but they're boiling and they're overflowing in their hospitals. And Tulsa is one of the worst hit areas. And now you're bringing in people from across the country that don't believe in wearing masks, that try and embrace each other. It seems like a terrorist attack against America. Like, it seems like it's a willing attack on America, where you know for a fact it's going to be there. You know that it still exists. You know that you want to have this strength of no one wearing a mask, and people are going to die because of it.
Yeah, but they're going to show us, Scott. They're going to show us. They know better. They're smarter. They're manlier.
I don't want them to cancel it. It's not about canceling it. It's not about winning or losing. It's not us versus them. It's us versus the virus. And if you're not wearing a mask, then you're on the virus's side. There's no other side. It's humanity versus the virus. And they're choosing the virus over humanity. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
People should be locked up. If they have a problem with wearing a mask, it should be treated as if they're wearing no pants and no underwear, maybe just full nude outside. Like, that's what it's got to be. Like, oh, okay, maybe you don't want to wear pants, when you're outside or whatever, but it's for the benefit of everybody if you do so. And so the fact that I have my individual liberty, screw your liberty. Screw that. That is not true. I have the right to live. And that comes before anything. And you are inhibiting on that. You're making it so that we don't reopen. Like, screw you. That's not appropriate. There's nothing right about it. There's nothing righteous about it. There's nothing strong about it. It shows weakness. It shows hatred. It shows the fact that you're un-American, that you're a traitor, and you want to hurt Americans, or you think that you're not going to get sick and you're not going to spread the virus. You don't know that. We don't even know enough about the virus to know how badly it infects children, how long it lasts in the system, whether or not it's going to spread forever and ever, if we're ever going to find a vaccine at all. And we're going to rush into things so that we can run into the same mess again, shut down again, and maybe never reopen some states. I don't think people realize how bad this is going to get. We're not at the bottom yet. They will get worse. What is the next thing that Trump's going to do?
Yeah, but here's the thing, Scott. The reality is I've had those back and forths of people who are saying, look, you know what? I'm just going to live my life. People are going to die. That's just how it is. It's only going to be a couple of percent. So what? As long as it's not me or my family, I don't care. And there are people who think that way. I mean, you've got the lieutenant governor of Texas, for Christ's sake, saying that, well, I've lived a nice long life. We need to have an economy for our children.
Yeah, I refuse to accept their pathetic responses to everything where they want to play the blame game. Somebody's to blame for this, and Antifa's to blame for the spread of the virus and all these problems or whatever. It ends up being right-wing militia groups. You know what I mean? Like, everything that they talk about that they stand for is not true. And so, like, when General Mattis did compare Trump to Nazis, he meant it. And so when you talk about Trump being a Nazi, what does that make the people who work for him? What does that make the Republican officials who stay silent? I mean, we're not talking, it's not brave of Mitt Romney to say Black Lives Matter. It's not brave for him to march. It's the right thing to do.
Right.
And like bare minimum. So they can't even get a grip on reality. They say, oh, there's all this bias on social media. There's so much bias. It's against us. It's not bias. That is reality. People are against you. They do not support you. The bots that you have lift up your tweets so that you get a couple thousand retweets in the first hour, and it's very clearly bots. You don't have real support. It's not reality, and they live in this false bubble, and it just leads to disaster for every person willing to partake in it. And we've talked about this before. We've locked people up that have committed crimes in this country with Trump, the dozens of people that have done so. And it's just going to get bigger and bigger. But the worst part about this is we have, it's not going to get better. We cannot reopen anything legitimately without all of the measures in place. And so we've got to make, basically, long story short, we've got to make the measures law. We have to make it clear what the rules are. We can't expect people to follow. No, you have to tell them, you must wear a mask at all times if you're in public, or you're going to be fined $500. Make it hurt. You can't just let it go. It is too costly. It's more costly than speeding.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Scott. You're still not going to get that. I mean, where I live here, you've got a sheriff who has said that, they're not going to enforce Governor Wolf's stay closed order on businesses. They're not going to do it because we're free, damn it. You're not going to, this is going to be one of those things where you're going to get police departments and sheriffs who are they're not going to enforce it. So it comes down to the enforceability. I'm with you. This should be one of those things that we enforce. Sadly, once you make it a mandate, you're going to get people who just because they're contrarians and just because they're a pain in the you-know-what, they're going to go against it.
Hey, maybe they can use that money that they collect from those fines and spend it on PPE that Trump did not for the medical professionals.
Maybe that's the way we go. And look, I'm worried what's going to come out of this rally. And like you, I fear that this is going to be the second wave of the first wave, and it just gets exponentially worse. So the question then becomes, as we look at these moments, where do we get sane leadership from? I mean, what we see coming out of DC right now is just nuts. When Donald Trump came out and said that people who are wearing masks are only doing so because they don't like him, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. And I think what we're going to see, and it's just going to happen, is the biggest kind of presidential race, and it's going to be, yes, it's Biden versus Trump, but it's also Obama versus Trump, and he hits the campaign trail starting next week. He's going to be doing a fundraiser for Biden, and he's full speed ahead at that point. I think to be real with everybody, I think that Obama is the person who is poised to be the biggest voice of reason. I think Biden's doing a great job. I think he's doing the right things that he needs to do right now.
Yeah, he has sharpened up these last couple of days.
Yeah, and I think that the reality is Barack Obama was president of the United States for over 8 years, and he remains insanely popular. And so it's going to look like he's running as well. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah, me too. I pine for the days where I didn't have to think about who the president was, and I didn't have to read some insane tweet and go, this is a threat. I just have a problem. Now, today, the big news, obviously, is Amy Klobuchar has pulled her name from consideration for VP, citing that she wants to see a person of color, a woman of color, put in that position. I'm curious your thoughts.
It's kind of like if someone's in a tight primary and then they say, for a congressional race or something, and they say, I'm not going to accept corporate PAC money, but they're not going to give you corporate PAC money anyways. It's like, I'm not going to the Academy Awards this year, and the reason I'm not going is because I wasn't invited. So I'm just not going this year. I mean, that's the kind of twist on it. I think, I've had a relationship with her, whatever. But I don't think that she would be the right choice. I think that we're looking right now as Harris as the top contender. I think there's some dark horses in there would be Val Demings from Florida. And then also Tammy Duckworth, who is one of my favorites, for the VP slot, a veteran, and she's got a very talented history of winning and a very long Rolodex, and is very respectable with her military background, and also surviving the blast overseas while in war. So there's a lot of, the good news is all of these people will be campaigning on our behalf everywhere. But yeah, I think it's not going to be a surprise to anyone who the VP nod is. And I think that you have a white dude, you have to be honest about the ticket. You have a white dude at the top of the ticket. Like, you can't, and you promise to have a woman. And so you have to choose someone who is not like you have to choose a true progressive. Like you can't do anything. You have to have the opposites there too. So anyways, I think that it's going to wind up being Senator Harris. I think that she's insanely popular on a broad spectrum. I think that, with baggage in regards to politics and whatnot, she has some of the lightest baggage, and she's been really, really vetted. And I also think that we need someone that can be a leader, from the non-white communities, speaking at a national level. And it's unfortunate it's not the top of the ticket again, but so we at least need to have a vice president. I think that's like we need to have the diversity and also the strength of a ticket, the strength of a woman, and also I welcome anybody again, but I don't think that I don't think Klobuchar would have been the right fit for this year. I just don't think it would be good.
Yeah, I didn't see her at all anywhere near being chosen. And you're right. That was one of my first thoughts going, well, you weren't really going to be chosen anyway, especially in the aftermath of what happened in Minneapolis. With
she made it so much.
Yeah, too much baggage. Now today, Susan Rice is all over Twitter and all over the internet for saying that Trump supporters belong in the trash heap of history. So a lot of people are throwing her name to the front of it. Any thoughts on her?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fear in regards to national security and background. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that Trump's built around her to protect this sort of mantra. And I think that her links to Obama and Hillary are not going to be beneficial to her in the process, in the vetting process. I think that she'd be extremely qualified, and she'd be, she'd be 10 times better than Pence, obviously. But I don't think that she's going to be the right fit. I think, again, if I was a betting person, I would say that Kamala Harris would be the fit for who should be. I mean, she's wonderful, and I think would be a great leader for the ticket, and just fix Biden when he goes off course and things like that. Not afraid to speak up, but also a powerful president, if not more powerful of a presence, an attack person on the ticket, prosecutor on the ticket. I think that leadership, and also second in command with a person who's Biden or Trump. You need a strong leader in the background as well. So, no chance Elizabeth Warren. I don't think so at this point. I think that you have to have. It's just not going to work. It's just my guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the room. I love all these people, and so it's hard to for the most part. It's hard to choose, and I know that's part of what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that, again, like if they were to ask me, I'd say that Senator Harris should be the VP nod. Yeah, see, I got to tell you, I think it was part of, as these campaigns go. I think the Biden campaign had her do this. You had Klobuchar step out very publicly and say that very publicly to kind of lead the way forward. I saw this as choreographed. I didn't see this as Klobuchar going on her own voluntarily. Knowing what I've heard about her, I just don't see that. Nobody does that because you want that speculation. You want to stay in the news. You want to, you don't want to quell the rumors because they're not negative rumors. It's like, so you take positive rumors and you get it. I guess that's what it seems. So I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think that it's going to be a surprise who they choose. Like, people were legitimately surprised when Biden was chosen as VP for Obama. Turned out to be a perfect slot for him. I think that they're thinking along the same lines as to what's best for all the facets of campaigning, right, and also based on what we're going to be up against and what we need. Like, again, I think that they're going to make the right decision with that. But whoever it is, they're going to be better in every single way, except for doing things badly or illegal things. They're going to be better for this country than anybody. So I would take any of them. And keep in mind, whoever is not VP probably will be in the administration. So we're going to have to figure that out. But first we got to win, and whether or not the polls say 12 up nationally, we are going to finish this in regards to we're always going to work as if we're behind, and we're going to sprint through the finish line no matter what. We could be up in all 50 states, which is Dems will play in all 50 states this time. They're going to have to defend their campaigns, and we're not going to have any kind of we're not holding anything back. Everything's on the table in regards to making sure that we fight in Idaho and Wyoming, in places we maybe never did. And I think that's going to be one of the most important things in the campaign season coming up, as we have less than 200 days left until the election.
There you go, Coach. We're gonna fight like we're behind, and we're gonna run through the finish line. Good stuff, Scott. I appreciate the time as always. Great talking with you. Thank you. Visit masksnow.org to help out in regards to the masks effort. Thank you very much, Rick. There you go. Good stuff. Masksnow.org, the website. Make sure you check that out. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
A major wildfire continues to burn just north of the valley. So far, it has scorched more than 89,000 acres.
2020 wildfire season lights up with an ominous start.
All 85 felony counts were read at length, including the names of those killed because of the campfire.
California utility PG&E pleads guilty to manslaughter. We can hit 90% renewable electricity by 2035 and save money. Plus,
this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity.
New Jersey governor vows to make state the nation's offshore wind industry hub.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
As we restart from the pandemic, I do not want to see our state simply get back to where we were before COVID-19.
I hear you, Governor. I've been to New Jersey. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, totally unfair New Jersey slam. I love New Jersey. I've spent a lot of time in New Jersey. I've gone camping and canoeing many times in New Jersey. It's beautiful. It is not a toilet at all. What sort of stories do you have for us today?
Well, first up, the 2020 fire season is off to an ominous start. In Arizona, the wind-driven bushfire in the Tonto National Forest northeast of Phoenix has explosively grown to more than 100 square miles. As we go to air, it is the 7th largest fire in the state's history. Evacuations have been complicated by a surge in coronavirus infections in the state, straining emergency response capacity. About 2,000 people, it looks like, have been forced to evacuate.
So it's an issue in these shelters if they set them up, how they're going to social distance. And this is Arizona, where the COVID crisis is blowing up.
Indeed. In California, the National Interagency Fire Center is forecasting above average danger for the state after its mountain snowpack melted a month early. Fires have killed hundreds of people in California just since 2017. This week, bankrupt utility giant PG&E pleaded guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter and an 85th count of illegally causing a fire for its role in igniting the devastating Camp Fire that obliterated the town of Paradise, California in November 2018, the deadliest fire in state history. PG&E admitted in court that the fire was caused by its failure to maintain its equipment in what Bloomberg News calls the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history.
Has anyone gone to jail yet?
No.
Will anybody go to jail?
No.
If I committed 85 counts of manslaughter, do you suppose I would go to jail?
Yes.
Man, corporate personhood is nice, ain't it?
But some good news, the U.S. Senate this week passed legislation to finally permanently fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, one of the nation's oldest conservation programs. The House is expected to pass it as well. The bill provides crucial federal funding to protect land from development and preserve natural and cultural resources, along with billions to address maintenance backlogs in the national park system. Democratic Senator John Tester, who led the effort to secure permanent funding, was ecstatic.
So we can have the best conservation tool available to the great state of Montana, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and make some serious investments in Yellowstone and Glacier and other national parks around this country. This is a great day. Tally ho.
Well, it is a great day, but how did Republicans accidentally let that pass through the Senate?
Because it helps vulnerable Republicans who are up for re-election.
Oh, I see. They need all the help they can get at this point, I guess.
And yes, it is a big deal that the funding is finally permanent. However, it comes from offshore drilling revenues, which could create a perverse incentive to maintain offshore drilling as the nation shifts away from fossil fuels.
Ah, every Republican has a big butt.
A new study finds that the U.S. can reach 90% renewable electricity by 2035, just 15 years from now. Researchers at UC Berkeley found that a nationwide push to transition to carbon-free electricity would create hundreds of thousands of jobs each year because it would require upgrading the entire system, building lots of new wind and solar projects, new transmission lines and grid capacity, and electrifying buildings and transportation. And they found it would cost less than our current system. And bonus, would prevent as many as 85,000 deaths from air pollution.
Now, if we can just fund it by profits from oil pipelines, I'm sure the Republicans will be all in favor.
And New Jersey this week unveiled a huge plan for renewable energy. On Wednesday, Democratic Governor Phil Murphy unveiled a $300 million proposal to help New Jersey's long-term economic recovery by creating the nation's first offshore wind industry hub.
Eventually, the wind port will house multiple factories, creating thousands of jobs, where the parts for offshore wind turbines will be built, as well as the staging areas to move them directly from the port to the offshore wind farms that are going to rise not just off our coastline, but up and down the Atlantic seaboard.
Very cool. Once again, my apologies to the people of New Jersey. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Donald Trump said in an interview with Axios today that we got to get back to our lives. And that evidently they're going to have a wild evening in Oklahoma. And, hey, while you're killing yourself, why not have a little fun along the way? While you're infecting yourself and others. Thumb your nose at us and all of that. Just plain crazy. And no wonder the vast majority of people in this country think we're going in the wrong direction. And here to share some thoughts on, the big rally that's coming up. Also, the Bolton book. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney, to come back and share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So it's going to be a wild evening, according to Donald Trump, and we just got to get back to our lives, Bob. We've holed up for too long, damn it.
Well, I think it's going to be a wild aftermath and a debatable aftermath. You know, this is about a personal reset, I'm going to call it, Rick. It's debated within the campaign, we know that, about whether they should have, started now to have some type of rally. On one hand, people say, yes, they should do it. The point I would make, too, it goes into the deepest of the deepest red state to do it.
Right.
Basically comfortable territory. I think this is about more about Donald Trump, the person, Donald Trump, the president, and that's what this rally is about, because he is having misgivings of every which direction. Look, Rick, they've been talking very quietly about maybe getting rid of the campaign manager. Most people don't know his name, Brad Pascal.
Yeah, who we find out didn't vote for him in 2016.
Well, yeah, right. And Lindsey Graham, remember what he said about the president and how he's supporting him. So things change in this strange business, as you know. But Brad Pascal is close to Jared Kushner. They've elevated a second person as a deputy campaign, and he's close to Jared Kushner because you got to be close to Jared Kushner. And this is the brainchild of Pascal to come up with this Tulsa rally. As far as some of the debate on the virus, what's happening too, this is a mixed message because the Trump campaign has put out there, the press secretary, I watched her today when she said, look, you, the media, you're not saying anything about all the protesters, thousands and thousands, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, you don't say anything about that. So they're mixing the message about, the quote, danger factor here, of course. But I think that this is about re-energizing him, period.
Right.
So I don't think they're sitting contemplating any aftermath. There'll be aftermath. I think they want Joe Biden, out publicly at some point in time because in one way they can't define Joe Biden, because this is not the normal day of politics where you're out doing events, so they can't define him. And then on the other hand, let's be realistic about this. Biden is now ahead in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and is not doing bad at all in Ohio. And he hasn't been out yet. So, I think there's uneasiness in the Trump campaign, and one way or another this rally was going to happen.
Yeah, the one that surprised me is Florida. Biden up 50-43, and Gallup's latest poll. I'm going, wow. Florida is usually the state that tilts towards the Republicans. That was a huge one for me.
Well, it is, and Ohio in itself, which can go any direction. Let's face it, it's went for Obama at one point in time, went against Clinton. It can go in any direction, but in Ohio, the numbers are fairly skewed all over the place because it's close in some areas and not in some areas. But basically, the president's not doing as good in Ohio as he should be doing.
Right. But I don't think he's doing well in the country because, the latest NORC poll I just saw, 74% of people polled, including 63% of Republicans, say the country's heading in the wrong direction. I don't know that if you're the incumbent president, that's something that you're looking on very favorably.
Right. And, I read those polling numbers today, and, there was a point in time, too, this week where it was leaking out where the president was considering not debating Joe Biden. I mean, think about that. Trump not debating, so those are all signs that this is extremely unsteady. And again, you and I have talked about this. This is good news for Biden, but there's a lot of factors that can happen out here. If there's continued, I argue that if there's takeovers of cities by groups, that helps Trump.
Right.
In the long run, it helps Trump. And so I think there's some factors there that are yet, out of anyone's control. And then, of course, the virus and the economy rebounding. I just saw today where, the Trump officials are very easily talking about another stimulus package because, they're desperate at this point in time, worried economically because that was the mainstay that always kept President Trump going was the economy.
Yeah, the unemployment rate.
Always.
Basically answering that question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And clearly the mass of the country is not, if you ask them that question today. So clearly they're going to have to do something to pump money into the economy to get things revved up.
Right. And, here's the bottom line. I think what's happened in such a short period of time, it shocks me. Campaigns, as you know, nobody that I know knows better than you do grassroots campaigns. You do. I know you do. And, you've been in the trenches, you know how it works, you know the unions, how it works, how everything runs. And you've got to adapt to things, right? You know that, and I know that. Well, through this whole political situation, I have been shocked that the campaign has not changed at all and has not changed dramatically with what's the new situation in America in many ways, be it race, coronavirus, economy. They haven't changed, Rick.
Nope.
And they are where America was in January, and this is not January.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think they still believe that their base is loyal to the end, even if it means you're going to, get them in a giant auditorium and get them infected with some virus. I think they believe that their people will follow them right off the cliff.
Well, I think again, you're right. I think this is personal to get him re-energized because he is, for the first time, maybe not publicly, but he's faltering pretty bad over this. He's scared over it, and this rally is more about resetting him than resetting the campaign.
Yeah, you got to get him in a place where he's feeling the love, because this week was not a good week for him. I mean, the Supreme Court beat him up pretty good. He, on the LGBTQ issue, on the immigration, it's not been a good week.
Well, and let's look at something. As I sat at the last convention, and I was with, two people at that convention, we were sitting there behind, and Donald Trump did everything except wrap, himself in a pride flag, in front of the convention. All right. He came out and said what he was for. He was for LGBTQ. He used the word Q, rights, everything. And then here his Justice Department tries to undo the rights and fight the Supreme Court, and then he's talking about needing new justices. So he just completely went against what he said at the convention. He had, talking about a new justice. You don't do that with the Supreme Court. You appoint justices. You don't say, well, I'm going to get new ones. They happen to be in there for life, whether we like it or not, right?
Yeah.
So he did that. And then DACA. What is easier to accept on this planet, seriously, for Republicans to accept, is DACA. It's easy to accept. These are people that, had no bearing on where they came, how they came, and how they grew up here. But again, they just threw that away too by fighting the whole executive order of Obama.
No, this is one of those moments where I think back to a girl I had interviewed a couple of years ago who said that they want to send her back to a country she's never ever stepped foot in. And I think about that. I mean, you're right. I mean, this should be the no-brainer. This should be the thing that gets done. But now you've got Trump saying that they're going to probably go back after it now.
Right. And he should have let those two issues go. He should have absolutely, not fought them. He wouldn't ruin his base over it. They're going to take him over Biden. But instead, he's taking now people who, might have been sympathetic towards him, and they're saying, what on earth is he doing now with his policy? So, it created a bad week because he lost on two issues he probably shouldn't have fought anyway.
No, I'm right there with you. And not to mention, this was the week that all the Bolton book stuff came out, of which, again, I know how fond you are of John Bolton.
Right.
Mike Pompeo evidently called him a traitor, who was spreading a number of lies, fully spun half-truths, and outright falsehoods. I don't know. Like I said, like we talked about the other day, I don't think Bolton's a liar. I don't like him. I think he's a horrible human being and very dangerous. But I don't know that he's a liar.
Well, he's despicable. He's dangerous. As a top former NSA, appointee, he probably should have said a lot of things. He should have walked after he was fired. He should have walked out to the microphone and said everything he's saying in the book. He's doing this for money. I mean, I can go down a list of things. This guy has led to wars. He's led to people dying. He is despicable. He's evil. Everything. But I think that, despite everything I just said, he obviously kept notes, and I think for the most part, he is accurate in telling the truth. And so, we can say those things about Bolton. He doesn't have credibility. But obviously, this isn't something that helps the president this week.
Right. But last question I've got for you, does it matter? I mean, honestly, look, everything that's come out, we knew most of this. We knew most of what he came out with at this point. I'm sure there's a lot more detail in the book that we don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. And on the other side, people who support Trump, they don't care. So does this matter?
Well, I mean, you're correct. It's not going to matter to the base, and also for the people that loathe Bolton, it's really not going to matter then, because they loathe Bolton probably more than the truth affects them, to be honest with you. I have a lot of friends, progressives that hate him so much that even they're saying, yeah, these things we knew, but, what are you going to do? It's Bolton, it's Trump, they deserve each other, et cetera. So, yeah, I think in the long run it doesn't. This is not the silver bullet for the fall, but it's just not a good thing either this week to come out for the president.
And the good thing for Trump, and this is my other take on this, the good thing on this book for Trump, since the court apparently is not going to issue a restraining order, or at least that's the reporting that I've seen. They're not leaning in favor of it. Is that it's 592 pages. You can't get Americans to read, a newspaper article, let alone 592 pages.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it's it's the end of the world thing. Again, it didn't provide a good setting for Trump this week. But I mean, what would you expect? And of course, they're calling him Crazy John Bolton. Well, they hired Crazy John Bolton.
Yeah.
Let's remember that.
Well, and you stop and think about it. Since you brought up the hiring of Crazy John Bolton, you think about all of the people that Trump has hired. That remember he was going to hire nothing but the best. And you got Rex Tillerson, who he evidently that he called, what was it, totally ill-prepared and ill-equipped to be Secretary of State.
Right.
I hired Mattis, who he said was the most overrated general ever. He hired Kelly, who he said he knew full well that he was way over his head. Sessions he took, who ran for the hills evidently, and of course John Bolton, who, as you said, he was washed up. So, he doesn't have a really good record of bringing in the best people like he promised us.
One thing that surprised me, when he won the election, and because Pence was in the White House, I served with Pence. Pence knows how to run a congressional office. Pence has been around presidents and offices as they work. And the one thing I thought to myself was that Pence will bring gubernatorial skills, congressional skills. He'll know how to run that inner train right in the White House that makes all the trains run around the cabinet.
That was my fear too.
That didn't happen because I think, frankly, probably to Pence's defense, Trump didn't let him do anything anyway.
And hopefully maybe I'm going to give him too much credit, but maybe he decided I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to stay the hell out of the way.
Well, that's true, because maybe he would have been then, quote, fired.
Yeah.
You're fired for the next race here coming up.
If you remember, there was actually a little bit of talk of that last year.
Was. Absolutely, there was. But none of the skills Pence could have provided him, which would have been the liaison also to the Congress, was developed or appreciated by Trump, because he's tried to run the White House like he ran his businesses, is what he's tried to do. And he put it all in the hands of his son-in-law, and that's what you've got today. President Trump and Kushner in the White House, they act like everybody they're talking about was forced on them by Barack Obama. Here, John, you're going to hire John Bolton. Here, they act like they didn't hire him themselves. They act like somebody else forced them to hire these people. Maybe Obama forced them to hire these people, and then they had to fire them all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they act like. They hired them.
They play the victim card better than anybody.
Oh, yeah.
You got to give them credit. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day that 2,000 Union soldiers marched into Galveston, Texas. With them, they carried the news that those enslaved were now free. The Confederate General Robert E. Lee had actually surrendered more than 2 months earlier. Why then was there a delay in delivering the news of emancipation to Texas? It might have been that there were not enough federal troops to enforce the order. It has also been speculated that freedom was postponed to allow enough time for the enslaved workforce to harvest one last crop of cotton before freedom. Whatever the reason, General Order Number 3 finally was delivered. It read, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation of the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer." On hearing of the news, the newly freed people celebrated. The next year, they celebrated again in a holiday that became known as Juneteenth. In the years that followed, the holiday spread to other cities. But in the segregated South, black residents were often barred from holding Juneteenth events on public land. That is why in 1872, several black men in Houston purchased property and established Emancipation Park as a space to hold the celebration. In 1980, Texas became the first state to formally recognize Juneteenth. Today, this holiday is celebrated in black neighborhoods across the country, with gatherings, barbecues, songs, and remembrances of the fight for freedom. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in Washington, D.C. today, big rally to recognize Juneteenth and to highlight police brutality and Black Lives Matter. A number of folks at the AFL-CIO, a number of unions out with a demonstration there. Out on the West Coast, our friends with the ILWU, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, they actually shut down the Port of Washington for a bit of time in observation of Juneteenth. In fact, there were demonstrations at 28 seaports in California, Oregon, and Washington to obviously recognize the day. And if you remember back on, I think it was June 9th, they actually shut down a number of terminals for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in the amount of time that the police officer had his knee in George Floyd's neck. This is the kind of stuff that I think has to happen more often. Working people need to be standing together more often. And look, the reality is and I've talked about this before. I think all workers should have the right, the absolute right to have a voice on the job and a say on the job and be able to bargain collectively. But at the end of the day, when you look at the things that have gone on and the studies that have happened, too many of these big city police departments have taken this too far. And I've had a bunch of people saying we should be banning police unions. And look, the reality is, the labor movement never wanted to embrace police departments. You go back to the founding of the AFL, basically saying we don't want our oppressors in our union. Because the truth of the matter is, and I've been on picket lines over the years where policemen have come in and cracked heads and done some things that I was not fond of, and they were fellow union members. I have a problem with that. There's an opportunity for labor to step forward, to step up, and to speak out. And if it means shutting things down, if it means blocking roads, if it means making people uncomfortable, then that's what it's going to have to take. But the ideal of fighting for equality for all is worth it. At the end of it, for me, the sad reality is if we are divided, we are exploitable. And if we are exploitable, we will be forced to work for poverty wages, no benefits, and no opportunities. And that's not a future I want for anybody. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.